This week on Jerusalem Dateline, new fighting inside Syria creates another Middle East humanitarian crisis. We'll have a frontline report and see how the IDF and a Christian ministry are helping. Plus, ancient seals bring to life the people of the Bible. And a new novel transforms today's headlines on Israel into a thriller for a new generation. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We're coming to you this week from the front lines of the Syrian-Israeli border, and behind me you can see some of the thousands of Syrians who have fled the recent fighting. It's just the latest humanitarian crisis here in the Middle East, and the crisis has presented for Israel both problems and opportunities. The fighting centered on the southern city of Dara, where Syrian troops pounded rebel positions. The offensive combined Syrian ground troops with Russian air power to regain control of southwestern Syria along the Israeli and Jordanian borders. That's an area that recently had been part of a U.S.-backed truce. The fighting created a humanitarian crisis in southern Syria. The UN estimates more than 300,000 Syrians have been displaced by the conflict. This drone footage shows the camp set up to house these people. This activist called the conditions deplorable. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the crisis at his weekly cabinet meeting.
With regards to southern Syria, we will continue to defend our borders. We will extend humanitarian assistance as much as we can. We will not allow entry to our territory.
Following the fighting next to its border, the IDF deployed more troops to the Golan Heights and reinforced their current positions with additional armor and artillery. In addition to increasing its military presence, the IDF launched a humanitarian operation to assist Syrians caught in the fighting. In a nighttime operation, they provided 60 tons of aid to displaced Syrians. The aid included tons of food, baby food, clothing, and shoes sent to an undisclosed location in the Golan Heights. The IDF also provided emergency medical care to a number of Syrians wounded in the fighting, including some children whose parents had been killed. IDF medical personnel provided life-saving medical treatment, and some were transferred to Israeli hospitals for further medical care. The humanitarian aid is part of Israel's Good Neighbor policy, where they have treated thousands of Syrians for years during the Syrian civil war. To learn more about the situation up here on the border, what the IDF and a Christian ministry are doing, we talked with Dalton Thomas of Frontiers Alliance International and Marco Moreno, who developed Israel's Good Neighbor policy.
FAI, we are working on launching a team now, a medical team, inside the refugees camp in order to help them on the medical field. Because it will take a couple of days and, diseases will start, children, will have issues. So FAI is engaging immediately, first of all sending a medical team and also a relief, tents, babies' food, whatever we can supply.
Right now it's critical to engage the issue of displacement and the refugees on the ground because it's the hottest months of the year right now. So in terms of dehydration and hunger and medical issues, we're seeing a mounting, escalating humanitarian crisis. And now is the time for believers to engage. The door is open, we have the access, we need to engage.
FAI has sent medical teams inside Syria for more than a year.
In the end, it's Jews and Christians helping the Muslims. I think it changed the hearts and minds of people here because they finally realized that Christians and Jews are not so bad people. They came in the toughest hour of their life, the Muslim side, and helped them. I think it's beautiful.
We've experienced nothing but hospitality, kindness, and warmth. And the reception is, we've been working in conflict zones for a while now. I've never seen anything like this. So yes, Syria is the most dangerous place on earth for sure, but it's also the most hospitable place on earth.
The Syrians, when they came first time, they were surprised because they saw Arabic language on the signs. On the road, they said, how come it's in Arabic here? They say, hey, we have 1 million Muslims living in Israel, part of us, civilians. And then they will go to the hospital. They will see a Christian doctor, a Muslim doctor, a Jew working together. So they will say, hey, this is not what we have been told, that you guys, the big Zionist enemy. And here you are saving our life.
Would you say this is a field white unto harvest?
This is a field that is ripe and white unto harvest. You know, the Lord said, don't say 4 more months till harvest. And I think that's the word of the Lord for right now. Don't say 4 more months. Don't say in the future. The door is open. We need to engage now.
They should know that the IDF is the moral army you can find in the world. We help the enemy each night. And now a Christian ministry, FAI, is partnership with the IDF, doing the same. So in a way, the IDF had a torch and he wanted to pass it on to someone. And only Christian ministry came and engaged to the Muslim community. I think it's beautiful. I think the American, if I'm an American, I can be proud of a Christian ministry doing that. If I'm an American that likes Israel and bless Israel, so he can be proud in the IDF with the Christian ministry helping the Muslims.
We need human bodies. We need salt and light people on the ground. So if you're a medical professional, education, psychological, trauma counseling, you name it, we need it. So pray for open doors for new areas of operation. Pray for resourcing. Resourcing is our biggest burden right now. It's the thing that, it's the most daunting thing is funding it. And then finding the kind of people that are suited for this kind of work, because you can't just be a good medical professional or a good leader or a good whatever. It's a challenge. You need the right kind of person to engage this kind of environment. So if that's you, apply. If you're burdened by this, please pray with us and pray that the Lord would thrust forth laborers into this.
Please be sure to pray for Frontiers Alliance International and what they're doing to help Syrians caught in the crossfire of the Syrian civil war. Well, as Americans celebrated their independence on July 4th, Iranians have their own dream of freedom as well. Public anger is rising and many people have taken to the streets to protest, and it's fueling dreams of a regime change. But some of those protests have been met by violence by Iranian police. Iranian police fired on protesters demonstrating in the streets about salty, muddy drinking water during a severe drought in the country. While Iran's foreign minister downplayed this incident, it follows last week's protest at Tehran's Grand Bazaar, outside Iran's parliament, and in dozens more locations across Iran.
We are now, I believe, very realistic in being able to see an end of the regime in Iran. We can see it.
Mayor Rudy Giuliani cited those demonstrations at the annual meeting of Iran's main opposition group.
They continue to grow and grow with numbers that now threaten to topple the regime. When that happens, then freedom is right around the corner.
Giuliani credited President Trump's decision to pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal and reimpose sanctions for putting enormous pressure on Iran's economy. He noted today's protests were coordinated and that even more economic pressure could soon hit an Iranian economy already in freefall. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the impact of the sanctions.
In complete contrast to what the international experts said, not only has the reimposition of sanctions not united the Iranian public around the regime, the complete opposite is happening.
Netanyahu's also used social media to speak directly to the Iranian people during the unrest. Michael Oren, Israel's Deputy Minister of Diplomacy, told CBN News, Israel is trying to resurrect an historic friendship.
You know, the Iranian and Jewish people have an historic alliance. It goes back 2,500 years. We were never at war with these people. Their government, their regime has been at war with us. Up to 1979, up to the Iranian Revolution, we had excellent relations with the Iranian people. We want to go back to where those relations were in 1979 and to restore what we see as an aberration in our historic friendship.
Despite the growing opposition to the Iranian regime, Oren is cautious about expecting change.
For many years I've been heard about imminent change of governments in Iran. For the last 40 years it hasn't happened. So let's be cautious about it, and frankly, let's hope.
Coming up, a look at ancient seals from Jerusalem that bring the Bible to life. Again, we're on the Israeli-Syrian border, and behind me are just some of the thousands of Syrians displaced by the recent fighting in the more than 7-year-old Syrian civil war. Well, about a 3-hour drive from here in Jerusalem, thousands of years ago, King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah used to work together. Now, thanks to archaeology, they're together again in, of all places, Oklahoma. Personal seals that likely belong to them are on display together for the first time. What connected the two men is an exhibit of their personal impressions that would have been used to seal documents. A simulcast linking Jerusalem with Oklahoma's Armstrong Auditorium marked the debut.
This is a celebration day for all our friends and especially for the lovers of Israel and the Bible.
Archaeologist Dr. Eilat Mazar helped uncover the artifacts in 2009.
This is one of the bullae that we found. It's a seal impression, very tiny, as large as you can see it now, but this is only 1 centimeter in diameter, even not the nail on my finger.
Workers uncovered both items just a few feet apart here at the foot of the Temple Mount. Historically, it's been called the Ophel, meaning a high place to climb to. King Hezekiah, considered one of Judea's greatest leaders, and the prophet Isaiah lived some 2,700 years ago.
When people wanted at that time, biblical times, to seal a document, they used, they tied the document with the strings, and then they took a little tiny mud and pushed their private seal to the soft mud and made a seal impression which contained, and you could read their names.
Hezekiah's reads, belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah.
To find such a private item that relates to one of the Judean kings, we came so close to that kind of figure.
Isaiah's isn't as clear. It reads belonging to Isaiah, but the second word is missing a letter that could complete the Hebrew word for prophet.
Whenever you find discoveries like this, actual physical items that people can touch, and they have inscribed on them the names of biblical figures, it's always powerful. This is science proving the Bible.
Mazar's grandfather, Benjamin Mazar, led the first excavation after the 1967 Six-Day War that reunited Jerusalem.
My grandfather excavated 10 continuous years without stopping. This was a fantastic project. Almost no parallel in dimensions. Hundreds of people worked. They revealed fantastic remains of ancient Jerusalem from all periods.
We've had a partnership with Dr. Eilat Mazar since 2006, but our relationship with the Mazar family actually goes back to 1968 when her grandfather worked with the namesake of our college, Herbert W. Armstrong. So since that time, we've sent students to volunteer on the excavations, and we've also provided funding for some of her work.
Dr. Michael Oren, Israel's Minister of Diplomacy, calls Eilat Mazar a hero.
She has fought for Israel's future by fighting for its past, and against the face of a lot of naysayers, and particularly people in the world today who deny a historical connection between Israel and the city of Jerusalem, people who deny there ever was a King David or a King Hezekiah or a prophet Isaiah. Eilat digs down and she finds it and she proves them all wrong.
10 years ago, while digging in the city of David, Mazar believes she discovered King David's palace.
Its monumentality is obvious. Everybody can see. Also its date, been constructed sometime around 1000 BC, the time of King David in general, based on the pottery that we found underneath and within. These facts brought us to understand that we've got fantastic monumental construction.
While many archaeologists dismiss the Bible, Mazar maintains it to be an important historical source.
The biblical stories and the New Testament story, by the way, it goes together because they just prove quite accurately the development of Jerusalem, and the way Jerusalem is described is quite accurate.
The Oklahoma exhibit contains other artifacts, including a life-size replica of Hezekiah's underground water tunnel. It's open to the public through mid-August. Oren believes the significance of these pieces goes way beyond science.
Archaeology is not just about revealing the past. Archaeology is about securing our present. Archaeology is about ensuring our future. Archaeology is about richness, it's about rootedness, and as Eilat Mazar will tell you, it's about truth.
Up next, meet the co-author of a new book bringing today's headlines to life. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline here on the Israeli-Syrian border. Brock and Bodie Taney have thrilled millions of their readers with novels like the Zion Chronicles. Now they've teamed up with Pastor Ray Bentley from Maranatha Chapel in San Diego, California, for a new book called On the Mountain of the Lord. Recently, I talked with Pastor Bentley overlooking the city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount.
Pastor Ray Bentley, great to be with you here in Jerusalem.
It is great to be with you, Chris.
With an amazing view behind us and the city of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. You've written a book called On the Mountain of the Lord. What's the book about?
Just recently, in the last couple of years, had a divine appointment where I met Bodie and her husband Brock Taney, and they have written these series like the Zion Chronicles series, and all about historical novels, all the way from the first century through the rebirth of Israel. And I met her and I was like, wow, I've read your books. This is awesome. How amazing. And after I met her, I was studying and getting ready for a sermon, and I felt God speak to me and say, why don't you ask Bodie if she would write a story with you, where I would kind of do the prophetic background. She would write the story. And so I called her up very nervous and said, I don't know if you would ever think of this, but would you prayerfully consider maybe doing a book with me? And she stopped. She said, well, I've never done this before, but Brock and I will pray about it. They prayed about it and came back and said, the Lord told us to do it. So it's a modern story about modern Israel and how prophecy is coming together. And there's a main character that, I don't want to give away and give a spoiler, but he was a believer, and some tragedy happens in his life where he loses his faith in God and the Bible, and he gets tied into this whole thing of counseling peace for the Middle East and for Jerusalem in particular. And this guy he doesn't believe in God anymore, and he goes, I don't believe in old men with beards walking through the desert and that they've got solutions to modern problems, But he comes to Jerusalem, has a series of miraculous divine interventions, gets caught up into it, has this epiphany, this moment where he's like, oh my gosh, it's all happening. And I think people around the world right now are having that same kind of, uh-oh, what's going on? When Israel became a nation, that got us going. When 1967 Jerusalem was conquered, that got us going. But then decades happen. It's been 50 years even since then. And now all of a sudden it's back again, and it's moving the pieces forward to pointing to the return of Jesus Christ.
Without giving too much away, what do you want people to take away from the book when they read it?
Well, so the book title is On the Mountain of the Lord. And one of the things that I didn't know for a long time, and many Christians I don't think are aware, is that the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve started in paradise, beauty and everything, and walked with God in the cool of the evening, the Garden of Eden was on top of a mountain. And when sin came and when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, essentially they had to go down the mountain to the howling wilderness and the curse and thorns and thistles. And so the story of redemption in the Bible is how God came down from the top of the mountain, and through the incarnation, he walked out into the wilderness and out into the thorns and thistles of the curse of this world. He grabbed Adam with one hand and Eve with another hand, and he walked us back up to the top of the mountain, back into the garden, back into fellowship with God. And I think that's why so many of the stories of the Bible happen on mountains. Mount Sinai, the giving of the Ten Commandments, and Mount Carmel, and Elijah with fire, and even Jesus' most famous sermon was called the Sermon on the Mountain. And of course, that's where the temple was. That's where the Lord is coming back through the eastern gate. It's all about that mountain that's right there behind us. And I think when people read this story, they're going to understand all the Psalms and the prophecies that talk about the mountain of the Lord.
And you want to reach a new generation, is that right? Millennials?
Yes. I kind of grew up with this, hearing about prophecy in Israel, and the next generation, I think they've kind of not really heard it, or they've lost it a little bit. I want to take the millennial that says, what is this about the Bible and prophecy and end times? What does that have to do with me? I want to take them on a journey. I'm going to take them on a story. And by the end of that story, I think their eyebrows are going to be raised and they're going to be going, oh my gosh, Could I be actually living in the generation when Jesus Christ is actually coming soon? And that's what he prophesied. Chris, in Matthew 24, he said, the parable of the fig tree, when you see the fig tree blossom, which is Israel, everything happening with Israel, Jews from around the world coming back into the city, and the focus being on Jerusalem, you know what Jesus said? When you see that, the generation that sees that, he said, I'm at the door. We don't have very much time. It's time to get right and get right with God and wake up and, you know, smell the coffee and be prepared for what God is about to do.
Up next, an opportunity for you to come to Israel and see the land through the eyes of a reporter. Perhaps you've wanted to come to Israel but waiting for just the right opportunity. Or maybe you've been here to Israel but want to see it through a different perspective. Well, later this year, I'll be hosting a tour, and maybe it's what you're looking for. Take a look. Hello, I'm Chris Mitchell, and I wanted to invite you to the Israel Through the Eyes of a Reporter tour this November 30th to December 9th, 2018. I've been reporting from Israel for nearly 20 years, and I want to share some of those insights and experiences I've had during that time. We'll have daily briefings on the current situation and discuss the geopolitical developments in the area, and we'll also walk in the footsteps of Jesus and visit places like the Mount of Beatitudes, Capernaum, and take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. And we'll come here to Jerusalem and see the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, and the Garden of Gethsemane. The saying goes, when you come to Israel, you'll never be the same. And my wife says that before you come to Israel, reading the Bible is like reading it in black and white, but after you come here, it's like reading it in color. Well, I hope you can consider being part of the tour. And we'll certainly be talking still about the crisis here on the Israeli-Syrian border. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.